In the harsh frontier of 1880s America, where lawmen could be bought and justice was scarce, ordinary people learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. The autumn sun hung low over Silver Creek as cattle rancher Elias McGregor guided his weathered bay horse down the dusty main street. The familiar creak of leather and jingle of spurs accompanied each measured step, but something felt wrong in the settlement today. An unnatural silence had settled over the wooden storefronts like a burial shroud. McGregor pulled his wide-brimmed hat lower against the glare and surveyed the eerily quiet street. Where were the usual sounds of commerce and conversation? The blacksmith, his hammer lay silent, and even the saloon seemed deserted at this hour when cowboys typically gathered for their evening whiskey. His destination was Bennett, his gun shop, a sturdy building of weathered pine planks that had served the community faithfully for nearly a decade. Old Samuel Bennett was known for his reliable firearms and fair prices, but more importantly, he possessed information that McGregor desperately needed about recent cattle thefts plaguing the territory. As McGregor approached the shop, his unease deepened. The front door stood slightly ajar, and no lamplight flickered in the windows despite the approaching dusk. He dismounted slowly, his spurs ringing against the wooden sidewalk, and called out in his deep, gravelly voice, "Samuel, you in there, old friend?" Only silence answered him. Drawing his Colt revolver from its worn holster, McGregor pushed the door open with his boot. The familiar smell of gun oil and metal was tainted by something else, something that made his stomach clench with dread. The shop appeared undisturbed at first glance, with rifles still neatly displayed in their wooden racks and ammunition boxes stacked in orderly rows. But Bennett was nowhere to be seen. A muffled sound from the storage room at the back of the shop caught his attention, a soft whimper that barely carried through the thick wooden walls. McGregor moved carefully between the displays, his boots creaking on the rough floorboards. Another sound reached his ears, this time unmistakably human. The storage room door was locked, but the brass key hung on its usual nail beside the frame. McGregor turned it slowly, the mechanism clicking in the stillness. What he discovered beyond that door would haunt his dreams for years to come. Samuel Bennett lay unconscious on the floor, blood trickling from a wound on his gray head. Beside him, bound with rough hemp rope and gagged with a torn piece of fabric, was a young woman. Her dress was ripped and stained, her dark hair matted with dirt and tears. But it was the mark on her right forearm that made McGregor, his blood run cold. Burned into her flesh was the distinctive brand of a coiled serpent, the calling card of the Reynolds Brothers gang, known throughout the territory as the Viper Brothers for their merciless cruelty. McGregor quickly holstered his weapon and knelt beside the bound woman, his calloused hands working swiftly to untie the crude knots. Her eyes, wide with terror and exhaustion, followed his every movement as he freed her from the ropes that had cut deep marks into her wrists. "Easy now, miss," he murmured in his gentlest tone. "You are safe. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." The woman tried to speak, but only hoarse whispers emerged from her damaged throat. McGregor carefully removed the gag and offered her his water canteen. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin as her trembling hands struggled to hold the metal container steady. Samuel Bennett stirred with a low groan, his weathered hand reaching for the growing lump on his skull. Blood had dried in his gray hair, but his breathing remained steady. McGregor felt relief wash over him. The old gunsmith would survive. The ride to Dr. Westfield's office took only minutes. The woman sat sideways in front of McGregor on his horse, her body rigid with pain and lingering fear. He could feel the heat radiating from her branded arm through the torn fabric of her sleeve. Dr. Westfield, a thin man with kind eyes, had served Silver Creek for 15 years. He took one look at his patients and immediately set to work. Bennett required only cleaning and bandaging of his head wound, but the woman needed more extensive care. "She has been through considerable trauma," the doctor explained quietly to McGregor. "The brand is infected, and she shows signs of severe dehydration and exhaustion." For 3 days, the woman remained in the doctor's care, drifting in and out of feverish sleep. McGregor visited daily, bringing fresh flowers and sitting quietly beside her bed. He found himself studying her face during these silent vigils, searching for something he could not quite name. On the 4th morning, she finally spoke more than whispered words. "Violet," she said, her voice still rough but stronger. "My name is Violet." Something stirred in McGregor, his memory at the sound of her name, like a half-remembered melody from childhood. He leaned forward in his chair, studying her features more carefully in the morning light. Violet, he repeated slowly. That is a beautiful name. I am Elias McGregor. Do you remember what happened to you? Her eyes darkened, and she pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. The Reynolds brothers, she whispered. They came to our farm 6 months ago. They said we owed them money, but we never borrowed anything from them. When my father refused to pay, her voice trailed off, and tears began to flow down her pale cheeks. McGregor felt his jaw clench with familiar anger. The Reynolds brothers had been terrorizing honest folks throughout the territory for years, but the local sheriff seemed powerless to stop them. 2 weeks passed before Violet was strong enough to leave the doctor's care. McGregor arranged for her to stay at the Silver Creek Hotel, paying for her room from his modest savings. On a crisp October morning, they sat on the hotel's wooden porch, watching the sun paint distant mountains gold. You have been kind to me, Mr. McGregor, she said quietly. I wonder why a stranger would show such generosity. McGregor studied her profile against the morning light. Perhaps we are not strangers. Did your family live near Copper Valley 20 years ago? Her eyes widened with recognition. The McGregor Ranch. You were that Elias McGregor. I remember now. You were friends with my brother James before he died of fever. I was just a little girl then. You had pigtails and followed us everywhere, McGregor said with a sad smile. James complained his little sister was too curious. You asked 1,000 questions about everything. Tears gathered in Violet's eyes. He would have been 28 this year. The fever took him when I was 12, and father never recovered. That is when we moved away. The Reynolds brothers took my ranch 3 years ago, McGregor said bitterly. They claimed I owed them money for protection I never requested. When I could not pay, they burned my cattle barns and poisoned my water well. What happened to your family? My daughter Mary was 16 then. After losing the ranch, I could not provide for her anymore. She went to live with her aunt in San Francisco. McGregor, his hands clenched into fists. I have been working as a hired hand since, trying to save money to start over. Violet placed her hand over his. The Reynolds brothers destroyed my father, his farm too. They claimed he owed them for seed money, but father kept careful records. He never borrowed anything. When he showed them his books, they laughed and burned them. What became of your parents? Father died of a heart attack 6 months later. The stress broke him completely. Mother tried keeping the farm running, but without father and with our savings gone, she could not manage. She sold everything and moved east. Violet, his voice cracked. I stayed behind, working as a seamstress, hoping to rebuild what we lost. They have ruined too many families. The law seems powerless against them. I have been watching them, Violet said quietly, learning their routines, their methods. They are not untouchable. That is dangerous thinking. These men are killers. My capture was not an accident, she said steadily. I was gathering information when they caught me, but I learned enough to know they can be stopped if someone has courage to stand against them. McGregor returned to his small room above the stable that evening, his mind churning with everything Violet had revealed. From beneath his narrow bed, he pulled out a worn leather journal bound with string. Its pages contained 3 years of careful observations about the Reynolds brothers and their criminal enterprise. The next morning, he found Violet waiting in the hotel dining room, her face pale but determined. Without a word, he placed the journal on the wooden table between them. I have been keeping records too, he said quietly, glancing around to ensure they were not overheard. Every illegal transaction, every family they have ruined, every crime they have committed in this territory. Violet opened the journal with trembling fingers, her eyes widening as she read the meticulous entries written in McGregor's careful handwriting. Page after page documented the Reynolds brothers' reign of terror across 3 counties. Silas Reynolds is the leader, McGregor explained, pointing to the first section. He is the one who makes the deals and collects the money. His brother Clayton handles the violence when people refuse to cooperate. But there is a third man they call Blackjack. Nobody knows his real name, but he seems to be their connection to corrupt officials. I have seen Blackjack, Violet whispered, her voice tight with fear. He was there when they captured me. A tall man with a scar across his left cheek, always wearing black clothes and silver spurs. He spoke with an educated accent, not like the others. McGregor flipped through several pages, showing her detailed maps of properties the gang had seized illegally. They have taken over 16 ranches and farms in the past 2 years alone. Each time, they claim the owners owe them money for services never requested. Look at this, Violet said, pointing to an entry dated 6 months earlier. The Morrison family farm. That is right next to where my parents live. I remember when old Tom Morrison died suddenly. Everyone said it was his heart, but maybe. The Reynolds brothers visited him 3 days before his death, McGregor confirmed grimly. His widow was forced to sell the farm for a fraction of its worth to pay their invented debts. They spent the morning comparing their information, creating a comprehensive picture of the gang's operations. Violet had observed their meetings with local merchants and noted which businesses paid them protection money. McGregor had documented their cattle rustling activities and mapped their hidden supply routes. We have enough evidence to hang them all, Violet said finally, closing the journal. But who can we trust with this information? The sheriff takes money from them, and most of the town council is too frightened to act. McGregor nodded slowly. There is talk of a new federal judge coming to the territory next month. Judge Harrison from the territorial capital. They say he cannot be bought. Word of their investigation spread quietly through Silver Creek like wildfire in dry grass. Within days, other victims of the Reynolds brothers began approaching McGregor and Violet with their own stories of loss and injustice. The first to join them was Ezra Kent, the town blacksmith whose calloused hands shook with rage as he spoke. They cheated me out of $200 last spring, he said, his deep voice echoing in his forge. Promised to pay for horseshoes and tools, then claimed the work was poor quality when payment came due. Rachel Thompson arrived next, a widow whose general store had been the heart of Silver Creek until the Reynolds brothers forced her into bankruptcy. They demanded protection money every month, she explained, her worn dress speaking of hard times. When I could not pay, they scared away my customers and ruined my reputation with lies. The most surprising addition to their group was Quick Sam Morrison, the former deputy sheriff who had been dismissed under suspicious circumstances 6 months earlier. His badge had been stripped away after he questioned the sheriff's reluctance to investigate the Reynolds brothers. Sheriff Parker takes their money and looks the other way, Sam revealed during a secret meeting in the abandoned church outside town. I tried to arrest Clayton Reynolds for assault, but Parker ordered me to release him. When I refused to stay quiet, he fired me for insubordination. Violet studied each face in the flickering candlelight. We all want justice, but we must be smart about this. The Reynolds brothers have eyes and ears everywhere in town. One wrong move and we could all end up like the families who disappeared completely. McGregor spread his journal open on the dusty altar. Our evidence is strong, but we need more. We need proof of their financial crimes, forged documents, false contracts, stolen money. That kind of evidence will convince any honest judge. I know where they keep their business records, Rachel said quietly. During the months I paid them protection money, I saw Silas Reynolds going in and out of the old mining office behind the bank. They use it as their headquarters now. Getting inside would be nearly impossible, Sam warned. They post guards day and night, and the building has no windows on the ground floor. Violet smiled grimly. Leave that to me. I have experience moving unseen through places where I am not welcome. 3 nights later, when the autumn moon was hidden behind thick clouds, Violet made her move. Dressed in dark clothing borrowed from Rachel, she slipped through the shadows toward the old mining office behind the Silver Creek Bank. The building stood like a fortress in the darkness, its brick walls scarred by years of wind and weather. 2 guards sat on the front porch, their rifles gleaming in the lamplight as they played cards and shared a bottle of whiskey. Violet circled to the rear of the building, where a narrow alley separated it from the neighboring warehouse. She had noticed during her earlier reconnaissance that the second-floor window facing the alley remained unlatched, a small oversight that would prove costly for the Reynolds brothers. Using skills learned during her months of surveillance, she climbed the wooden drainpipe with careful silence. Each movement was calculated to avoid the creaking boards and loose nails that might alert the guards below. The window opened easily under her gentle pressure. Inside, moonlight filtered through dirty glass, revealing a cramped office filled with filing cabinets and scattered papers. The smell of tobacco and stale whiskey hung heavy in the air. Working by touch alone, Violet searched through desk drawers and cabinet files. Her fingers found what she was looking for, a metal strongbox hidden beneath a loose floorboard behind the largest cabinet. The lock was simple, and her hairpin made quick work of it. Inside lay dozens of forged land deeds, false loan agreements, and correspondence with corrupt officials throughout the territory. Most damning of all was a ledger book detailing bribes paid to Sheriff Parker and 3 county judges. As she stuffed the papers into her jacket, footsteps echoed on the stairs outside the office. Violet froze, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. The door handle turned slowly. "Check the upstairs office," a gruff voice commanded. "I heard something moving around up there." Violet squeezed through the window just as the door swung open. She slid down the drain pipe with desperate speed, ignoring the splinters that tore at her hands. Behind her, angry shouts erupted from the building. Someone was here. The strongbox is open. Racing through the dark streets, Violet clutched the stolen documents against her chest. These papers would destroy the Reynolds brothers forever, but only if she could reach safety before their men found her. Dawn broke over Silver Creek as Violet, McGregor, and their allies gathered in the abandoned church to examine the stolen documents. The papers spread across the wooden pews revealed a web of corruption that reached far beyond their worst fears. "Look at this," McGregor said, holding up a forged land deed. They claim ownership of the entire Miller Ranch based on a debt that never existed. The signature is clearly fake. I knew old Pete Miller, and he could barely write his own name. Rachel examined a ledger entry with trembling fingers. $300 paid to Judge Hawkins last month. That was right before he ruled against the widow Patterson in her property dispute. We all wondered how she could lose her case when she had clear legal title. Quick Sam studied the correspondence with Sheriff Parker, his face growing darker with each page. Parker has been taking $50 monthly for 3 years. No wonder he never investigated their crimes or made any arrests. The most shocking discovery was a detailed map showing all the properties the Reynolds brothers planned to seize over the next 6 months. 23 more families were marked for ruin, including several businesses in the town center. They intend to control the entire territory, Violet said quietly. Every ranch, every farm, every business, all under their thumb through fraud and intimidation. Ezra Kent pointed to a contract bearing an official territorial seal. This document gives them exclusive rights to all mining claims in the region. But look at the date. It was signed before the territorial governor even announced the mining survey. Someone leaked the information to them in advance. As they cataloged the evidence, urgent knocking echoed through the church. Sam peered through a crack in the boarded window and saw a familiar figure approaching. "It is Dr. Westfield," he announced, opening the door carefully. The elderly physician entered quickly, his face pale with worry. "You must leave immediately," he warned. "The Reynolds brothers are searching every building in town. They know someone stole their documents, and they are questioning everyone who might be involved." "How much time do we have?" McGregor asked. "Minutes, perhaps less. I saw them heading toward the hotel where Miss Violet was staying. When they find it empty, they will expand their search." Violet gathered the documents into a leather satchel. "We need to get these papers to Judge Harrison immediately. If we wait any longer, the Reynolds brothers will silence all of us permanently." The sound of galloping horses grew louder outside, accompanied by angry voices demanding answers from frightened townspeople. While hiding in the forest outside Silver Creek, the group made a horrifying discovery. Among the stolen documents was a crude map showing the location of an abandoned silver mine 20 miles north of town, marked with the words, "Work Camp," in Silas Reynolds' handwriting. "They are keeping people prisoner," Violet said, her voice tight with anger as she studied the map. "Forced labor to work their illegal mining operation." Sam examined the document more closely. "Look at these names listed here. The Hendricks family disappeared 6 months ago. Everyone assumed they moved east, but they are being held captive." McGregor felt his blood run cold. "How many people do you think they have taken?" "According to this list, at least 15 men, women, and children," Rachel answered grimly. "All people who refused to pay their fake debts or questioned their authority." The group faced an impossible choice. They could ride immediately to the territorial capital with their evidence, ensuring the Reynolds brothers would face justice. But the prisoners might not survive long enough for legal proceedings to save them. "We have to rescue them first," Violet declared. "I will not leave innocent people to suffer while we wait for judges and lawyers." "That mine is heavily guarded," Sam warned. "Clayton Reynolds keeps at least 6 armed men there at all times. We would be outnumbered and outgunned." "Then we use strategy instead of force," Violet replied. "I know the layout of mining camps from my father. This work. There are always multiple entrances and escape routes." They developed a careful plan. Sam and Ezra would create a distraction by setting fires near the main camp, drawing the guards away from the mine entrance. Meanwhile, Violet and McGregor would enter through an old ventilation shaft and guide the prisoners to safety through abandoned tunnels. The rescue began at midnight under a starless sky. Sam and Ezra positioned themselves on the eastern ridge overlooking the camp, while Violet and McGregor approached from the west through dense pine forest. "Remember," Violet whispered as they reached the mine entrance, "no unnecessary violence." We get the people out quietly and disappear before the guards realize what happened. Inside the mine, they found conditions worse than imagined. Families huddled together in makeshift cells carved from rock, their clothes torn and faces gaunt from poor food and endless labor. Children clung to their parents with hollow, frightened eyes. "We are here to take you home," McGregor told them softly. "Follow us quickly and stay silent." The prisoners moved like ghosts through the dark tunnels, hope flickering in their eyes for the first time in months. The rescue operation succeeded beyond their hopes. All 15 prisoners escaped safely through the old mining tunnels while Sam and Ezra's fires kept the guards busy fighting flames on the opposite side of the camp. By dawn, the liberated families were hidden in the forest, receiving food and medical care from Dr. Westfield. Within hours, news of Judge Harrison's arrival reached them. The territorial judge had come to Silver Creek 2 days earlier than expected, accompanied by federal marshals who answered directly to the territorial government rather than local corrupt officials. McGregor and Violet approached the judge's temporary courthouse, the town meeting hall, carrying their satchel of stolen documents and accompanied by all the rescued prisoners. The evidence they presented painted a picture of systematic criminal enterprise that shocked even the experienced judge. These documents proved fraud, kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy, Judge Harrison declared after examining the papers for 3 hours. "The scope of this criminal organization exceeds anything I have encountered in 20 years on the bench." The Reynolds brothers were arrested that same afternoon. Sheriff Parker tried to warn them, but the federal marshals moved too quickly. Silas and Clayton Reynolds were taken from their headquarters in chains, while Black Jack was captured attempting to flee town on horseback. The trial began immediately. Judge Harrison had seen enough corruption in frontier territories to know that delays only provided opportunities for witnesses to disappear or evidence to be destroyed. Violet took the witness stand on the second day, her voice steady as she described her capture, imprisonment, and the horrors she witnessed in the mining camp. Her testimony, combined with the documentary evidence and witness accounts from the rescued prisoners, created an overwhelming case against the defendants. The Reynolds brothers operated a criminal empire built on fraud, violence, and human suffering, she testified. They destroyed families, stole land, and enslaved innocent people for their own profit. They showed no mercy to their victims, including children and elderly people who could not defend themselves. Sam testified about Sheriff Parker's corruption, presenting the ledger entries that proved years of bribery. Rachel and Ezra described the systematic extortion that had nearly destroyed the local economy. The rescued prisoners shared harrowing accounts of forced labor and brutal treatment in the mining camp. On the 4th day, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges. Judge Harrison sentenced Silas and Clayton Reynolds to 20 years of hard labor in the territorial prison, while Black Jack received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. Sheriff Parker was stripped of his badge and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment for accepting bribes and obstruction of justice. With justice served, the long process of rebuilding began. Judge Harrison ordered the return of all illegally seized properties to their rightful owners, using the detailed records found in the Reynolds brothers' strongbox to identify legitimate claims. McGregor stood once again on the land that had been stolen from him 3 years earlier. The ranch buildings were damaged and the fields overgrown, but the soil remained fertile and the water well could be repaired. More importantly, he received a letter from his daughter Mary announcing her intention to return from San Francisco now that their home was restored. Rachel Thompson reopened her general store with compensation money awarded by the territorial court. The building required extensive repairs, but the townspeople rallied to help her rebuild what the Reynolds brothers had destroyed. Within weeks, her bakery was once again filling Silver Creek with the warm scent of fresh bread and apple pies. Ezra Kent expanded his blacksmith shop, using his settlement money to purchase modern equipment and hire 2 apprentices. The increased mining activity in the region, now operating under legitimate ownership, provided steady work for his growing business. Quick Sam Morrison was appointed as the new sheriff of Silver Creek, finally able to enforce the law without corruption or interference. His first official act was establishing a citizen patrol to protect the community from future criminal enterprises. The rescued families began new lives with the support of their neighbors. The territorial government provided land grants and financial assistance to help them recover from their ordeal. Dr. Westfield worked tirelessly to heal both their physical wounds and emotional trauma. Violet faced her own choice about the future. The territorial judge offered her a position as a court investigator, recognizing her skills in gathering evidence and her dedication to justice. But her heart pulled her toward a different path. "I want to stay here," she told McGregor as they watched the sunset paint the mountains gold from his restored ranch porch. "This community needs people who will fight to protect it from those who would exploit the innocent." Together, they established a settlement protection organization, helping other frontier towns identify and resist criminal organizations before they could take root. Their success in Silver Creek became a model for justice and community cooperation throughout the territory. McGregor and Violet never forgot the lessons learned during their battle against the Reynolds brothers. They understood that freedom and justice required constant vigilance, but they also discovered that ordinary people, working together with courage and determination, could overcome even the most powerful enemies. The settlement of Silver Creek flourished under their protection, becoming a beacon of hope for all who sought honest opportunity in the American West.